Hey everyone, Alaia here. Welcome to a special indulgent episode of 18 to 49. I was dying to talk about Mad Men, and I think Brandy has had enough of me talking about Mad Men. So it's all about the network. So I reached out to my community and I said, hey, who else is a Mad Men fan? We need to talk about this. And interestingly enough, we've got 4 black people talking about Mad Men, and that's about as many black people as there have been on the show that have had speaking roles. Pretty close to it. Pretty close. I was laying in bed last night trying to do a count. I was like, there was Carla, the elevator guy, the guy from the first episode, Don, Shirley. So maybe there's been a little bit more.
But 5.
But we're close. Awesome. And then Peggy had a secretary at like Cutler, Gleason, and Shaw that had like one line. But
yeah.
You know, so I think Don had a friend. But you know, generally speaking, it's about 4 or 5 people.
Right.
So we've got some special guests joining me that I'm very excited about. I've got my friend Stephanie Lakey here. She is in Real Talk for Women, which Brandy and I have referenced several times on the show. And we also have CG McBride, who's another friend who's in Real Talk for Women. She's CG the Geek on Twitter. And we have Dee of the Mac and D Talk TV podcast here. So happy to have another TV geek and podcaster on this episode as well. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I'm so excited. I always get excited when I find other TV podcasts. I'm like, oh, especially like black people doing it.
Yeah. So. It's true. So I'm excited to have you all here, and I am only mildly obsessed. Wait, that's a lie. I'm obsessed with Mad Men, and I know we all have some feelings about it ending. So we're going to talk and we're going to see what happens on this episode. But for sure, first and foremost, we have to talk about the finale. And I know CG has some thoughts, so I'm going to save her for maybe last because she pulled out her laundry list.
Oh, man.
Oh, no. I don't. Maybe she should go first to get it going because I'm like, oh, no.
All right. CG, you ready for this?
I guess I am, yeah. Let's do this.
So let's talk. What did we think about the finale? What did you think, CG?
I had mixed feelings about the finale.
Okay.
I felt like I'm not one of those people who was expecting everything to be tied up neat into a bow. Mm-hmm. But I did feel like certain characters got the shaft, and I was really personally offended that they gave Don the Coke ad, like they basically credited to him when in actuality the song was written and the ad was formulated by a black man.
Oh, and interesting. I did not know that.
It was. I've seen several articles about it. And Weiner, throughout the entire history of the show, was saying, well, having black people in advertising would be inauthentic. They really weren't there. They didn't work at mixed firms. And it turns out it's just not true. And he gave something a black man did to Don.
Okay, now my view of it all is tainted. Still be a fan of the show after learning that.
Man, and it's funny. It's funny because like he tends to contradict himself because like I'm one of those like advanced nerds to where I read interviews after every season.
Me too. Me
too. And the big thing a couple seasons ago when Peggy went to the other firm, a lot of people were kind of hinting that she was going to be the one that write the famous Virginia Slim line, got a long way to go, I think, or something like that.
Yeah, because they gave her the women's cigarette. Ted gave her the women's cigarette. Yeah.
Right. And one of the things that he said at the end of the season was, well, we don't want to give credit to our characters for like real famous taglines.
Right.
And like this being one of the biggest Coke commercials ever, like it just seemed kind of like, well, you just said a couple seasons ago that you wouldn't give a character such an impactful ad in real life, and here we are. And then just another thing, he also said that he wouldn't do a JFK episode, and he ended up doing a JFK episode. So
right.
I know, like
he goes back on his word. They really shoved Coke down our throats this season, though. I mean, they really dropped the hints when they folded in Sterling Cooper with McCann, and they were all in the boardroom with, what is that guy's name? Why can't I remember? Jim Hobart.
Yep.
You know, he's like, you're going to get Orthopharmaceutical, and you're going to get Nabisco, and you're going to get Coca-Cola, and Don's eyes light up. And then in the episode I hated the week before, when he was in that tiny town, you know, they had the Coke machine, and it was like, hey, fix this. And then Peggy on the phone in the finale, don't you want to work on coke? So they were really, and someone said, I read some review where someone was like, so basically all of Mad Men has been a coke commercial. And I wouldn't go that far, but.
Well, to be fair, coke is like the holy grail of advertisement. Like you can't go, 24 hours without seeing coke somewhere in your life, no matter where you are in the world, presumably. So I get that because they are supposed to be the creme de la creme, and Don is the man that you want on your team in advertising.
Right.
So I understand that, but you're right. It was kind of heavy-handed, which is surprising because the show for me is such a slow burn.
Yeah.
That them to, push something so forcibly in our face. It was almost like, did it end too soon that you had to try to ram it home?
I was hoping it would be 2 hours. When I heard it was 75 minutes, I was glad it was going to be longer than an hour, but I thought 75 minutes is just 60 minutes without the commercials.
Right.
So it's really not giving us that much more.
Yeah. Even Joan did coke in the episode.
She did coke. That is true.
That is another hint.
It was pretty heavy-handed to me, and I enjoyed right. I enjoyed the show, and I enjoyed pretty much every season. But like you said, it kind of felt rushed, or like we were just sort of being hit over the head with how great Don is. Right. And I was just like, but he's a horrible person.
He's a horrible person.
Do y'all think AMC's idea to break it up like they did Breaking Bad kind of disrupted the continuity of the season?
Yes.
I felt disjointed coming back to it.
It felt disjointed. It felt disjointed to me, but I will say when I went back, because leading up to it, I watched the whole series again. And the first half of season 7, in terms of tone, feels very different from the second half of season 7. So to me, they felt like it should have been season 7 and season 8, which is really what it is when you take a year off. So I'm very annoyed with AMC for both Breaking Bad and Mad Men doing this and calling it one season. Like, the whole thing is, it's a different season because you took a giant break in between.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, the seasons actually changed. That's why it's called a new season.
Yeah. Like the first half, they seem to be putting some things in order, but this second half, it was a lot of goodbyes. I mean, they'd already said goodbye to Ginsburg, but it was a lot of goodbyes, a lot of like trying to wrap things up. So to me, the tone felt different, but now it would be interesting to watch all 14 straight through.
Right.
Yeah.
And see if it shifts. Well, let's take it kind of character by character in the finale. Starting with Pete, who had the least amount of screen time in the finale. He had more the week before. What do we think about where they left Pete?
For a guy that spent, 7 seasons taking all of the L's, to see him finally, like, get one win, I was just, because, like, I was just thinking, go ahead.
What do you like, Pete?
Because Pete's whole life has been like trying to emulate Don with the extramarital affairs, and then it cost him his wife, and then he was always like second and third fiddle at the office. And when him and Trudy were getting on the plane, I was just like, it would be such a Pete thing if this plane crashed.
I thought it was going to crash.
And I know it's so morbid, but like his dad died in the plane crash. I was just like, this would be the ultimate wrap-up of Pete's story if this plane just...
Oh, my God.
Now, see, here's what happened. I was on exactly the same place because I went to the live finale screening here in LA, so I got to watch it at like 7 o'clock, which was exciting. Like, I didn't have to wait until 10. It was thrilling. And, so for us, we had no commercials. So the hour flew by, and when I didn't realize we were in the wrap-up montage, so when I saw Trudy... and Pete, like, board the plane, I was like, oh, no, this plane is going to crash and Pete is going to die. Like, do we have to kill off 2 characters? Like, I thought he was going to die. And then I realized it was just an end montage, and I was like, okay. I mean, not that I would care if they killed Pete, but it just felt like, oh, God, they're throwing something up at the end. And I really thought that they were going to, like, make him die in a plane crash.
Wow. Right. I think for me, Pete was one of my, if not the most favorite character for me to watch.
Interesting.
Just because he had these great lines and the way he would like do his eyebrows and just like furl and just say crazy things. Like when he told Ted, when they were talking about moving to McCann, and he was like, I like it. And Pete's like, that's because you're a sheep.
Yeah.
It's like just pointed, just sort of jerky things that he could say to people. And I just love that. And I saw Pete struggle with trying to live up to his family's name and that whole thing, and like Dee said about trying to live like that fast life and realizing, no, even though Trudy is a tool and I can't stand her, she works for him. Like, I can stand her. She works for him.
I love Trudy.
And it's like her high-pitched voice and her whole phony baloney attitude and the way she got mad at him because her dad was cheating. Like,
Trudy was flawed, no doubt. But I think there were certain moments, like for a small character, I think there were so many great, like, minor characters on Mad Men. Like Mona Sterling, Roger's ex-wife, who's his wife in real life. Love her character. Brilliant. Love Mona. And then I remember when I think of Trudy, I always think of the episode where Don and Cosgrove come out to their house for dinner. And Trudy sort of like cons Don into it. Like, I've already talked to Megan. Don't try to pull one over on me. Like, I just love those like parts of Trudy. But, you know, they're the parts where I watch. And as like a modern woman, I'm like, really? Why are you taking this? Like,
well, because, but see, Trudy to me was, people always like to compare Betty with Peggy or other female characters. But I feel like Betty and Trudy were really like the opposite, like the same and the opposite of each other. Like, Trudy was really trying to do the happy homemaker, good wife act, but she knew it was kind of BS. And she was just like, no, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it my way and try to play the game so that it benefits me, which I kind of admire. She was like, I'm stuck here. I can't get a job. I have to depend on you for money. Let me make this work. Whereas Betty was kind of like, no, please make my life better, looking to the outside to make her life better. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's talk about Betty.
Oh, Betty. I have always liked Betty because I recognize Betty is a complete product of her time. You know, I can't be too mad at her for the things she did because, except for when she fired Carla, that was unnecessary.
Oh, let's not even.
But I felt like, you know, she bought into that whole thing, hook, line, and sinker. And when it didn't work out, she was really genuinely shocked. Like, this isn't going to be my life. Like, it's not going to be stepping outside of a magazine. It's like, no, sweetie. But, you know, she speaks Italian, so maybe she thought her life.
I love that line. I saw that again. She's like, I'm not an idiot. I speak Italian. I'm like,
that is like one of my favorite lines in the show. Yes. It's such a Betty thing to say.
Was.
Totally.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really appreciated how they kept her true to her character with the whole cancer diagnosis and the way she responded to it about her kids. And I don't want a big fuss, and this is what it is, and we just have to be strong and deal with it.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you for not making her turn left and do something totally that's like, where did that come from? And who is this person? We don't recognize her. She stayed true. And I really commend the writers for that, because rarely does that happen on a show.
She was definitely Betty until the end.
Oh, yeah. She kept smoking. She was like, well.
And even when the show started, like, didn't it start around the time that she lost her mom to cancer?
Yes.
And she kind of, that's when she was having the stress and the hand issues, and she kind of saw the effect of it. And, you know, and I think that this is probably one of the better parenting moments that she's had throughout the show, is like not making it a big deal and making it all, and being a drama queen that Sally kind of accused her of, and just kind of going out on her own terms.
I think this was Betty at her best in terms of parenting. Like, I just think she was ill-equipped before. I liked Betty as well. I did not hate her. We could talk about somebody I hate, Megan, but Betty, you know, like, I think that she did the best that she could.
Yes.
Right.
And I think at the end that was like the best parenting. And then, like, when Sally got her period and she was like, maybe one day you'll have a little girl and, you know, you can tell her all this. Like, I think she had some solid moments, at least with Sally. I mean, we can all admit that Bobby didn't have much to do on the show.
But wait, Bobby in the finale stepped up.
Yes, he did.
Bobby did step up.
Suddenly Bobby was like, I know Mama's dying and I'm making dinner. So what you doing?
Right.
Like, what?
They have to give him something. They have to give him something.
Oh, gosh, yes. Look, there were so many. To me, like you said, Betty really stayed true to herself. I didn't really appreciate the way Henry sort of handled everything. But I've been told that's just how, you know, men are when their wives get sick. But I just was kind of like, man, dude, you could be a little less. I mean, he could have been a little stronger for Sally, I thought.
Are you referring to when he broke down when he was telling her, or which part?
when he wasn't listening to Betty, I think when she was like, I just kind of want to I don't want to fight and do chemo and all that. I just kind of want to go. And he was just like, no, you have to fight. And I know that was about him, but he really wasn't listening. And he didn't listen to Betty when he asked her not to tell Sally, because that's something that should have come from Betty, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was with him when he told her, but when I pulled back and thought about it, I'm like, really, her mom should have been the one to tell her. But in the moment, I could totally see why he did it, going to the school. You know, I felt for him when he broke down.
Yeah.
But stepping back, I'm like, yeah, that probably should have been Betty's role.
Can I admit something horrible? I kind of feel like Sally should still go to Madrid.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you know, they're rich and Henry's there and Bobby's got this. I mean, she could go to Madrid.
Yeah, I think she should too.
Yeah.
For at least 2 weeks. I mean.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously Betty could go at any time, but given that she had 6 months, you know, go to Madrid, have that experience. Your mom will still kind of be there. But, you know, I think they've showed us a little bit at a time Sally playing the mother role, getting them ready for school, doing this and that. And so now it's just kind of her, like, stepping in to help. What do we think about then Sally and where she is? I think the episode was interesting where Dawn put her on the bus and and was like, you're beautiful or whatever, but it's up to you to be more
not
than
like
that.
us. Yeah.
I thought that was going to be the last we saw of her, and I'm glad that it was not.
Right.
I
love Sally.
I do too. She is one of my favorite child actors because they have asked her to do a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and like given the parents that she has, like, I mean, we talk about that scene with Henry and how Henry broke down. Like, that's one of my favorite Sally scenes because, like, somebody who could seem so disconnected from this family, like, she realized that, like, a burden and a load was being put on her, and she just carried that scene perfectly by just, like, simply like, patting him on his back.
Totally.
She's been amazing throughout.
Yeah.
I mean, all of Mad Men, really.
Yeah, she's been fantastic. And
she's such a find.
Yeah.
One of my favorites was actually the episode where the black lady broke into the apartment and pretended to be their grandma.
Yes.
So that's Black Lady number 7.
Oh, that's right. She had like a whole...
One for every year.
But when Sally was like, I've never heard of you. And then at the end when she's on the phone with Dawn and she's like, she knew all the answers. And then I realized I didn't know anything about you. I mean, Kiernan Shipka, just such a great actress.
When she confronts him about the fact he was sleeping with the lady down the hall, it was kind of like you see it in Kiernan Shipka's face, like, she's not my mom. Like, Megan's not my mom. I have no loyalty to her, but how dare you?
Yeah.
Like, I hate Megan, but who do you think you are?
And also nobody that I know of, nobody wants to see their parents having sex either.
Yeah. No.
Absolutely no. Don't even want to pretend that exists. Yeah. And actually, for me, I've abandoned shows because I've been annoyed by the teenager with the pissed off attitude. I'm sorry, Alaia. That's why I abandoned Parenthood. I couldn't do it. It was just so annoying. I was like, I'm done. But she carried it, and she did it so well that I didn't hate her for it. I understood what she was angst about. You know, I understood her teenage angst. I understood her anger and her pain. And so you're right, she played that part.
In the grand scheme of things, like, awards don't matter, but I really wish, like, she'd go up for an Emmy nomination or something.
Right.
Like, and I wish that there were more I wish there were more awards for, like, your body of work on a show. Like, because I think probably of all of the characters on Mad Men, from beginning to end, she was the one who was the most, like, consistently good, you know? She was great. And we watched her grow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for them to find her, like, when the show first started, she had to be all of, like, 7, 8?
Yeah, I don't think she was any older than 7 or 8 because she's not 18 now. She's, I think, 16 or something like that.
For them to be able to see her being able to do this, that's incredible foresight.
Well, that's why they kept replacing Bobby's. They were like, you're not working.
Bobby's just cut it out.
But yeah, if you notice, that's common on a lot of shows. Like, the little boy, you go season to season and you're like, wait, that's a different little boy. Or when I look to a show like The Americans, which I love, they don't give Henry, the son, much to do. But I really think, like, in The Americans, they're setting us up with something to go wrong with Henry because no one's paying attention to him. But most shows aren't that way. The little boy is just ignored. Like, the most we got from Bobby was one time he lied, and then another time he was peeling wallpaper.
Right.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah. So
she is. It's really hard to find a child actress that you can span. How long is? I mean, I know it's been 7 seasons, but it's had to have been at least 8 or 9 years.
Yes.
So
because there was one season that they took like a year and a half off, and I wanted to die.
But it's hard to find that. You know, you see it happen a lot where they start series with children really young and they grow up and they can't act and
they can't act.
Stuck with them, Harry Potter. But it was really pleasant to see Kiernan Shipka grow up and really handle her acting business. Like, she was on point.
Sure.
Yeah.
At this point, she's probably one of the most important relationships to Don.
Absolutely.
You know, like, I mean, there's only a few people that truly know Don Dick Whitman that he can, like, rely on. Anna was one. She's gone. He has Peggy, and now he has his daughter. So just watching that relationship and dynamic over the years has been great, because he has absolutely no relationship with Bobby, and I don't even know the youngest name.
Gene. I think Betty's thing is like, basically Henry is Gene's father. That's kind of, I think, how Betty thinks of it. But it's interesting, I think Don, really in like the last season and a half, he started to grow into the parenting role more, like talking to Sally every weekend. But even when Martin Luther King was shot, I think that was season 6, when he took Bobby to the theater, and I think that's when he admitted to Megan, like, wow, like, I really love this kid now, and I feel like I was just faking it before, or, you know, like something to that effect. Like, it took him a while, but I don't think there was ever a time he didn't love them. He was just not a good father, and he's not great now, but I think he's getting better.
I think some people are good with kids, with children.
That's true.
But he didn't know how to show up. He didn't know what that looked like.
And who would have taught him?
Right. He grew up in a brothel.
But before we get to Don, because you know I've got opinions about Don.
Well, I want to talk about Roger.
I love Roger.
Now, Roger is one of my favorite characters. Not necessarily his arc or anything like that, but everything he says is just so hilarious. And I'm like, I need to start a blog. And I'm like, I'm sure there's a Tumblr already. And I found one where it's just like Roger Sterling quotes. Like, everything he says is so like inappropriate and hilarious. I really like, especially after the episode where he and Peggy were alone at Sterling Cooper. I'm like, I am so going to miss Roger Sterling.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. I'm glad they didn't kill him off.
Yes.
Thank God. Live in a world without Roger.
Well, you guys, I don't know if you guys, I know you all said you read articles and stuff. He was only supposed to be around for like the first season. And then they just found him to be like such a delight that they kind of kept him on. When I stop and think now at the end of the show, like, what would that show have been like without Roger? It kind of would have been even more bleak than it is now, because he added a lot of levity to many scenes. Yeah,
absolutely. He was sort of like the person who gave everyone perspective. Like, you know, you could end up like me, you know, to the walking advertisement of what not to be. And so many people did not heed that warning. And that's why, you know, like Kinsey and some other people, that's why they're not there anymore. But Roger really was the poster child for don't do this. Like, it looks great, but don't do it.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm really glad.
But then he stepped up.
He did.
I'm really glad I got to see Julia Ormond in anything, because I love her.
I don't love her. Okay, maybe I do like her as Marie. Marie is just supposed to be unlikable.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Because I'm like, I can't stand Marie, but that just means that Julia Ormond is doing a great job as Marie.
That was probably my least favorite episode on the back end.
Oh,
it's like that whole episode focusing on her and Megan getting her stuff.
That I was so frustrated.
We only have 3 episodes left. I do not want to spend an hour with these people.
No.
Right.
I did not want to spend an hour with them, but I was also so pissed that they would do that. And then when Megan walked in at the end, I guess we can make this like Marie/Megan, but when Megan walked in and saw the furniture was gone, she didn't do anything to fix it. And she didn't say anything. And then when Dawn gave her $1 million check, which is insane, she still did nothing, said nothing. I cannot stand Megan.
I did not care for the actress's portrayal of whatever Megan was supposed to be in the show. And I'm still not sure exactly what she was supposed to be in the show.
I don't know if they had their minds made up when it started.
I knew Dawn wasn't going to get with Faye because she's not a brunette. But
she challenged him too much.
Way too much. But Megan, and everyone says, oh, you just don't like her because she has bad teeth. And I'm like,
oh my gosh.
No. Like, she was bad. When the Sharon Tate theory started floating, I was like, oh, okay, I could watch that.
Yes. Get her. This show has made me so cynical to people's lives, man. I wish that plane would crash and that she would be a part of some mass murder. I
remember the episode. I remember the episode where she broke things off with him. I threw my hands in the air thinking, we're done with her. So when they brought her back in the second half, I was like, oh God, more. Enough of her already.
I think they gave her way too much screen time in the end.
Yes.
And not enough screen time to people we actually gave a crap about. Like where's Dawn? Where's Dawn?
Yeah.
That's the one flaw that I saw. Like, she really had no connection to the show once her relationship with Dawn was gone. Because, Betty was stuck around because Betty has the kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Peggy is going to be around because Peggy's connected to the agency. But, once she stopped working for the agency and she's no longer married to Don, I don't feel like she could add anything to the show.
No, I didn't want to see her. And I'm sure I expressed this to Stephanie already. I was already annoyed with Megan for a very long time, but I really had my final straw when Stephanie showed up at her doorstep and she felt threatened and sent Stephanie away. And that really was just the final straw for me. And she was just so desperate at that point, the threesome, the party, the flirting with guys in front of him. I was so sick of her. And I will say, I just kept thinking, especially because I'd rewatched the whole thing. I'm like, I just want to know what happens to Stephanie. I want Dawn to find her. I said this to Brandy on last week's episode. Mad Men is never about what we want. It's about what Matt Weiner wants to give us. So I'm like, there's no chance I'm going to see Stephanie. So when I saw him show up on her doorstep, I was so happy. And though she did walk away from him and literally abandon him there,
yeah,
I feel better that at least it was on her terms and not Megan being a bitch.
Yeah.
Right.
Pushing her out.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a nice piece.
Which I understood why Megan did it, even though she was a jerk to do it.
Yes. I mean, I knew why she did it, but I'm like, you can't let her say goodbye. You're going to push her out the door before he shows up.
At 10 months pregnant.
Yes.
Right. And Stephanie's a blonde. There was no way Don was going to hook up with her.
Right. She doesn't know that.
Don and his sad little penis.
All Megan knows.
I don't know if it's
Dawn...
little, but I'm sorry. Inappropriate.
Size is a relative term.
Yes, it is.
All Megan knows is that Dawn is not paying attention to her, and that Dawn was not coming that weekend, but beautiful Stephanie was at the doorstep, and now Dawn's making an extra trip. So she felt very, very threatened, and that was my, end of the end for Megan. I'm like, I'm so done with her. There is no redeeming at this point.
I think that's the... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was saying she walked away with $1 million.
Yeah.
Which in today's terms,
$6 million in today's money.
Something like that. Yeah, because lately I've been watching the show during the rewatch. I'm such a nerd. I'm not even lying. I just had a tab up with an inflation calculator.
Yes.
So anytime someone said their salary, what their apartment cost, whatever, I would plug it in and see what it cost in 2015 money.
Right, because for the life of me, I'm trying to figure out. I couldn't figure out how much Don kind of walked away with.
Yeah, how much is he worth? Because Megan said he was a millionaire before she married him.
He got $1 million. He talking about retiring, but
if memory serves, he got $1 million payout from Sterling Cooper when they started their own company, or when they leveled up with Partners with Joan. And then he had some other investments. I think he probably had maybe $6 or $8 million when he wrote Megan that check.
I'm sure. But I'm just so curious, what he was able to, still, he floated Betty for a while.
Right.
There's still the kids. I don't know what kind of support he was quote unquote giving, considering she had a husband. I don't know what that was like in those days, but I'm just very curious what Dawn's financial situation was. But knowing that Megan walked away with $1 million check in 1970, I'm like, I don't...
Wait, to be a woman to be a talentless woman, to be a woman, and have $1 million. And her face was so frowned up, like, oh, I can't believe you dare insult me with $1 million. I was like, you know what? I'm not done with you.
So you guys, since you don't like Megan, which I don't care for her either, did you find satisfaction when Harry propositioned her?
That was still wrong.
No, because I actually wrote my notes. I hope Harry gets herpes.
Yes, and it falls off.
Yeah, right. Because I don't care how much I hate a woman, I don't want her to be treated like that by anyone. And Harry,
Now, as the only guy on this podcast, I am not going to defend his chauvinistic behavior, but I will preference that by saying that I am a reality TV junkie, so I see way more dirtbaggery than what Harry did. I mean, still, Harry's been an effed up person for
a long time.
So I was just like, yeah, that's messed up. I hope that's the last we see of him.
Mm-hmm. Very briefly, Harry and Ken are very interesting to me because they basically switched places. Ken was the ass in episode 1 that was saying derogatory things when Peggy got on the elevator. And Harry was the nice, like, I'm married. Like, let's go to lunch, but I'm married. And they totally switched. Like, Ken became, like, the softer creative, the family man, caring about his family relationships, like, not wanting to mix that with work. Harry became this, like, maybe the transition, I'd have to watch it again, but maybe the transition happened after he, like, went into the whole media and TV.
It happened when he got invited to Sterling Cooper when they first left the first time. It really happened. And Harry, to me, is a perfect example of what happens when you give about power and money, making someone more of what they really are. And that whole nice guy thing was his act. Yeah. Because that was how he got to fit in with the group of guys. But to me, he's what happens when you give nerds too much power. I say that as a nerd, but when you get guys, especially who feel like, you know, I've always gotten the short end of the stick, I'm a nice guy, I'm always friend zone, you give them some money and some power and a little bit of attention, all of a sudden they're these complete jerks. And Harry's a cautionary tale for a lot of people, I think.
I think when you give them too much power, but you still don't accept them into the group, because he still was never really accepted into the group.
He wanted to be a partner. He threw that in Joan's face. By the way, who told him?
Hello?
Yeah. So
Joan.
Well, let's talk about Joan. But yeah, I think the whole Harry Ken situation was an interesting flip. But yeah, let's talk about Joan.
Joan, to me, came the furthest. She started off kind of like...
You're right.
She started off kind of like, well, if I play I know these guys are being sexist, but if I play the game, I'm going to get ahead. And then she finally realized, I can't... the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. Like, I can't play up this vixen role and expect respect from these guys because that's all they're ever seen me as, I love Joan.
Yeah, me too. Well, I'm just a huge Christina Hendricks fan. Like you said, she has had one of the, I guess, highest growths of the show. Because, like, I just watched the first episode not too long ago, and she was basically like if you would have asked her 3-year plan then, would be to, like, snag an exec, marry him, and never have to work again. Like, when you look at her in the finale, she reaches a point to where she literally never has to work again, and she could be married and have this family, and she can't stop working.
Yeah. She really wants to build something of her own.
She wants to build something of her own, and that's why, that's my favorite character arc.
Me too.
Yeah, I love it.
I gotta say, the Richard thing at the end was interesting because he really showed her who he was multiple times. When she had to call the sitter, when it was so funny because the internet, I love the internet. When he came to her office and she made that sarcastic remark about giving up her child, and he's like, I didn't ask you to do that. And she's like, you basically did. Like, people thought, oh my God, Joan would give up Kevin. I'm like, are you kidding me that you even entertained that thought? Like, she may be frustrated right now, but there is no way in hell that she would have done everything she's done for her son and the way she protects him, that she would give him up for this dude.
Captain Orange, I call him.
Right. Yes. But, he showed her who he was then. And yes, he was supportive, and people started to think, like, okay, maybe Joan's found someone, but I don't think she should have taken him back then, because people show you who they are very early on. Mm-hmm. So I am not surprised. Like, and then when they were in Key West doing coke, and he was just like, you could be anywhere. It's like, she loves New York. Like, you know what she wants. You're either into it or not.
Mm-hmm. I think she thought, he'd change his mind, or he'd come around, or he'd see how happy it made her.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, okay, but he did not give a crap about her happiness.
He didn't give a crap, and he was just in a different place in life.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he said it too. He's like, I've already built something.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
But I love Joan. Some of my favorite scenes are with her.
Oh, wow.
Especially with her and Roger. This episode, when Roger basically came by and was like, oh, yeah, Kevin to be taken care of.
Yeah, that was a great scene. They got to a good place with each other.
Right.
And you could really see it in that scene. But I have to say, one of my favorite Joan scenes, I think some of my favorite Joan scenes are with Don. So in the one where the guy gets his foot run over with the lawnmower, that was a good early one.
Yeah.
But probably my favorite Don and Joan, okay, there's the whole Other Woman episode that's brilliant, and him showing up and the way they set that up. But probably my favorite scene is the one where she gets the divorce papers, and they go out looking at Jags, and then they end up in the bar.
Yeah.
One of my favorite Mad Men scenes, period, and one of my favorite Joan and Don scenes. Loved it.
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like, you could see why they tend to keep those guys separate. Because if you put them together, they would make some beautiful babies. I don't care about anybody else. You just, the chemistry between them two. That's what I wrote down as one of my top 5 scenes.
Yes.
Because it was just so natural. And when I think Joan had asked him to dance, and Don knew if he took that dance exactly where it was down, and he politely declined. That's the most restraint that man has shown.
Yes, ever. And I gotta say, that was great from the bottom to the top. Great on casting, great on the writers and directors, realizing that. When you think about it, we don't have many scenes of them alone. Right. And it's for exactly that reason. There's such magnetism there that it would be way too hard to not have something happen between Don and Joan. And then in the end, when they're in the elevator and it's just kind of co-workers, let's have lunch, seeing where their relationship ended up. And it had to end that way, because otherwise, it would just be them having sex all the time.
Well, it's important to show men and women being real friends, and between Joan and his relationship with Peggy, I mean, that's one of Don's redeeming qualities to me, is that he can recognize when a woman is too much for him, and he never goes for women that are better than him.
No. And his best relationships are with the women that he has not slept with.
Yes.
Right.
He can't keep a wife, but he and Peggy, they butt heads. But a lot. But they have that relationship, and then he's building this relationship with Sally, has the relationship with Joan. He was really close to, Anna meant a lot to him. Right. Yeah. So, it was great to see that Joan and Don relationship. And I will say, and this will tie into now Peggy, but I was shocked that Peggy stayed at McCann. And I was talking to some friends yesterday who kind of made me see why she did. But I was shocked that she didn't leave. And part of me, when I make up the future of what happens, part of me does want them working together or building something together. I think
Peggy and Joan.
Mm-hmm. And I think they make an interesting team, and they've reached this place of, I don't know, they get each other now.
Mm-hmm. Mutual respect.
Mutual respect.
Mutual respect. Yep.
So at first, actually, when I was watching it at the live thing, because normally when you're at home, you could pause, rewind, whatever. So when I was watching it live and the woman answered the phone, I thought that they had started the company together. And I thought maybe because Joan had mentioned the partnership is just for you, but I can find another writer. So I thought maybe, okay, Peggy will kind of work on this. And then it was when I got home and rewatched it that I was like, oh, wait, Holloway Harris, Joan's on her own. Joan cracks me up with not getting rid of that apartment.
I think Joan's smart with her money.
She clearly is, but she has had that apartment since the days of Greg.
Oh, God. Dr. Rapist?
Oh, yes, Dr. Rapist.
Yeah.
But I was hoping Peggy would have taken it, too.
I did.
Because my whole thing watching the finale was pretty much, how can we get a spinoff of anything? And I put a spinoff of Peggy and Joan just being catty and sassy and just kicking ass in the consultant business and production.
That would be a good spinoff, actually.
Right.
I would watch that.
I would watch it. I would love it. AMC needs it. I mean,
I don't know
they have
what
is
I'm gonna
Better
watch.
Call Saul and Halt and Catch Fire. So
And Better Call Saul is like a sleeper, but that's a topic for another day.
I love Better Call
I'm saying
Saul.
that's what I mean. It's kind of like a sleeper hit. Like it's under the radar. It's not in your face like Breaking Bad, but very good. But yeah, it's like, what do you watch on AMC now? I don't watch The Walking Dead. So
I do.
no.
You don't watch Turn.
Who watches Turn? Who watches Turn?
No.
Sleepy Hollow White. Like, no.
Oh my god! But Peggy, what do we think about where Peggy ended up? I've got to say,
I was disappointed. I'm sorry.
Peggy is interesting for me because we've always been the same age. So when The Suitcase, which is my favorite episode, when that happened...
I get really excited about that.
I love that episode. My favorite. And when that episode happened, I mean, I was still an entrepreneur, but I was working at a tech startup. My boss and I never yelled at each other, but I felt the same way about work. Like, I didn't feel appreciated, and it felt like there was a time when I walked into his office, I was part-time, and I was offered, like, full-time and more money, like, without asking for it. And I walked out still feeling like I'm not appreciated, I just got more money. And I tried to work the more money to my advantage, but I really felt for Peggy and identified with her then. And so I really saw myself in that. And then certain other milestones, like The Strategy, which was the top half of last season. Not one of my favorite episodes, but great Dawn and Peggy scenes. That's the one where they dance to My Way. And that scene where she's like, I just turned 30, and I'm like, oh, don't say it, Peggy. Don't say it. Like, I just related to her so much. But that scene when they dance to My Way, and then when it ends with her and Dawn and Pete and the Burger Chef, you know what? That probably is one of my favorite episodes. Like, just for those amazing scenes.
That's one of mine, my top. I bawled when I saw that.
I did too.
I was disappointed Peggy stayed, but I can't really articulate why. Because, like, it seems to me like it's not Peggy's nature to start off and do things on her own, the more I think about it.
Right.
Like, she's more of she's not a follower, but she's more of a, if I stick with this one thing, this is what I said I was going to be when I was 4, and I have to go be it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think Peggy stayed. I was disappointed that she stayed because she's going to have to fight to be respected there. Right. And she's going to have to fight really hard. Whereas if she'd gone with Joan, she would have been there. Her name would have been, like they said, on the door. So she would have automatically had that. And maybe it's in Peggy to want to fight, to prove herself in that ad world. Maybe she still, in some way, is that secretary.
The way the friend put it to me yesterday was Peggy probably realized what a position at a company like McCann would do for her resume. And she still had some career building to do. Whereas starting this business, yes, it would be their own business, but she'd basically be building from scratch, starting from the bottom. Whereas working for McCann could open a lot of other career doors for her. And I'm like, I get it. But part of me, I was one of those suckers who actually did like her and Stan getting together. And I have to say, again, like, I saw it live at a screening here. There were 1,600 people. So the energy was just, when I was laughing, there were 1,500 other people laughing. Do you know what I mean? And so when there was that scene with Stan, we were all like whooping and hollering. And stepping back, I thought, well, if I watched this at home alone, would I have felt more cynical about it? I'm not sure. But I am happy that someone got a happy ending, even if it was a little cheesy. Like, this show is full of so many, like, broken relationships, dashed hopes. Like, they could give us 2 seconds of happiness, and I love that it happened on the phone, the way it did with Stan. But part of me, when that happened, was like, okay, maybe now that they're together personally and they won't miss each other at work, maybe, not that Peggy should make her decisions revolve around a guy, but it made me think, like, okay, now that their relationship will continue, maybe she will change her mind, and maybe she will go, like, pursue this thing and realize that Stan was right. She's going to be great at whatever she does. So I kind of had that hope, but
And that's one of the reasons that I really like the finale. Like, this is a show that really beats its characters up.
Yes.
Like, so a lot of people was like, oh man, a lot of these characters there was too many happy endings, and I was just like, this show is like 6 years of struggle.
Yeah.
So much
It's
struggle.
like Good Times in the ad world. It's bad every week.
These people, like, in our minds, the story doesn't end. We just stop watching it, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
Who knows? Like 4 to 5 years, Peggy could be in that corner office in McCann and still with Stan or no longer with Stan. Like the show, one thing that the show provided us over and over is that it's real cyclical. Mm-hmm. Like people, they aren't shit, basically. They change. They revert back to their ways. Like, because, I mean, Don legit changed for a while. And then it was like, when Megan started on the acting thing, he kind of reverted back. Mm-hmm. So the show have put us in a point where we've seen these characters change, but eventually they do revert back. So, like, we just ended on the upswing this time.
We did.
Right.
And as Stan said to Peggy, he's like, you've got to let him go. He does this all the time. He disappears and he always comes back.
He's a survivor.
He's a survivor.
It's a boomerang.
Yeah. But I didn't I like Stan for Peggy because he sees her for who she is and accepts her. Yep. But I didn't like how the finale, to me, sort of forced them into this arc. And it just felt a little premature and forced. Like, what's that term, that like Latin term, machinist or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
That where they just take something and they just force it into the plot. And I felt that them getting together and the way they got together suddenly was just like, oh, we have to do something with them. Here, let's make them lovers.
But don't you feel like the precursor to this was that episode where they got naked in the hotel room? I mean,
that was his very first episode.
That was his first episode, and they've always had this tension. And I agree with what you said, is that Stan respects Peggy. He sees Peggy for who she really is, and he respects her. I think Stan is a mediocre kind of guy, and he's just like, let me just get where I can get and just chill. But he's one of those guys who is perfectly happy being mediocre. And Peggy kind of needs a guy who's going to let her be great and is okay with not being great himself. Does that make sense?
I don't know if he'll let her be great. Will he let her be great?
He has. I mean,
he thinks she's great now. And he's the one, like, when she's like, what did she say? Not the spoken like a failure part, but she said something else. And he's like, I said the exact opposite. Like, he's like, oh, you think it'll fail? And he's like, no, I said the exact opposite.
Yes.
I think it was you, CG, who said, like, or maybe Stephanie, I forget. But one of you said, like, maybe it's just in her to have to fight. And Stan brought that up. He's like, every time I'm in front of you, it's always a fight. And maybe that's just in her from what she had to deal with in the early days coming up at Sterling Cooper. But he's like, I'm not saying you'll fail. I'm saying you'll succeed at anything. And he's been supportive. Like, once they were kind of on the same team and he came around, he's always been in Peggy's corner. So I think I like them. In terms of personality, they've got kind of an opposites thing. And Stan, in that way, what he was doing kind of reminded me a little bit of an ex-boyfriend I had who... It was different for me because I was an entrepreneur and he was a 9-to-5 kind of guy. Like, he liked his job. He was happy with his job, but he was just very content to go to work, do his job, come home. Like, he wanted to improve his skills because it was fun for him, but he didn't have, like, the ambition, the drive of Peggy. Like, he didn't want to, like, run a department. He didn't want to be, like, the head of anything. He just wanted to be good at his job, and he was happy with that. So when Stan was saying that, I could see, like, okay, there are a lot of guys and women too out there who are like that. I knew a woman at the startup I worked at who was like, I could never do what you do, speaking to my entrepreneurship. She's like, I want to come to work, know what I'm going to get paid and when I'm going to get paid, and I want to go home at the end of the day. And that's what she wants out of a job.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people like that.
Oh, yeah.
But do they make good matches with people like you?
Maybe.
I don't know.
It might depend. I don't know. I'm not with that guy anymore.
I haven't found that it's a good match.
Yeah, who knows?
Because it's always, they have to go to work and you want lunch in the middle of the day or something. And it's like, well, sucks to be you.
Oh, man. So here we go. The big one. What do we think about Don?
Don and his sad little penis.
Let's let the man here. Don, take it away. What were your thoughts about the arc and where we were left with Don?
I will first say this. I want John Hamm, to win an Emmy.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
it makes no sense that this dude is not going to win an Emmy. Like, I get it. He's a handsome guy playing a handsome guy. And a lot of people don't think that requires skill, but he is legit good.
Look at his face. Like, his drunk face and his sober face. How the... What? Like, it's just his face alone. I'm like, how does he do that?
He gets all puffy. It's like,
one of the best Don faces is, it was an episode where he took Sally back to school and they had that long talk in the car. And she got out of the car and she said, I love you.
I love you. Oh.
Yes.
And on his, like, the confusion and satisfaction that he played with just his eyebrows. And that, like, I don't know, we're getting super technical, but, like, that dude is incredible. So where he left off, it seems to me that basically Don was burnt out and just needed a vacation. Because we're all going with the idea that he kumbayan on the cliff in California, and it inspired him to go back to McCann and write this incredible Coke ad. Then, I mean, it's kind of true to the show. Like, Don is an ad man at his core.
Through and through.
You know? And we could want him to change, and we could want him to be a better husband, a better father. But first and foremost, he's always been a great ad man. So if he took this voyage across the states and all it led to was him back in the office making better ads, then I would say that that's true to the character. Like, it would have seemed false to me if Don actually dropped everything and went back to New York to take care of the kids, because there's nothing. Well, there are, like, you know, small moments, like you said, with the Miss Sally and the movie theater with Bobby, but it doesn't seem like he would be well equipped to be a full-time parent. So that would ring false to me. And like him, you know, finally finding love and settling down with, you know, the waitress lady, that would have seemed false to me.
Right.
Because Don is who he is. And as much as we want characters to change, like you said, the show is cyclical. These people tend to revert back to who they are and what their comfort zones are. And that's kind of what I felt from the arc with him.
Yeah, like, I could see him going back because Betty was dying. I can't see him immediately becoming a better father.
Right.
But I could see him being like, because they still have this tenderness for each other, and it is the mother of his children and the woman he was with the longest, though he was
I love it when he calls her Birdie.
Yeah. I love that too. I could see him going back, and again, we didn't see her die, so I'm sure he was at the funeral, maybe even at the bed, you know, the bedside when she died. She still got 6 months of life. Like, we were just sort of left there. The Don arc was very interesting, and when he showed up on Stephanie's doorstep, and she said she was going up the coast to a retreat, I knew it was Esalen. I'm like, where else is it going to be? And so I had a feeling that they were going to end up at something like that. And this season, I will say, John Hamm, yes, he's an attractive man. So John Hamm in general, attracted to him. I've always thought, like, Don Draper was a dick. Well, I guess he is, Dick Whitman. But, you know, I was never one of those people that was like, oh, Don. I'm like, no, he's been a cheater since day one. I am not attracted to that. But I have to say, in season 7, I became very attracted to him. And I think it's because of the meltdown, you know, like losing his wife, losing his stuff, like being so, like, beat up. And he just seemed like a little bit less of a jerk. He's still Don. Like, when he tried to tell Stephanie to move forward, it's like, you tried this with Peggy, but Peggy was a different person, and she bought into that. Right. Stephanie's not buying it. And then you have to think, Don, think about that for yourself. Has it worked for you? No, you're still running. And I love Don in California. Like, when he's with, you know, when he's with Anna.
Some of his best moments are when he's vulnerable.
Yes, when he's vulnerable, when he's in California. And so I will say, I also love Don in, like, plaid. That was interesting. Cowboy Don. It was a very different, like, look for him. But, man, Leonard in the fridge. That scene where he was talking about being a piece of food in the fridge, I was like, this is hilarious and yet so sad. But when Don got up and hugged him,
incredible.
And again, acting with no words. He's so good at that. I thought the ending was a little cheesy with Don, like, oming, and last night I watched the episode again after I was, like, talking to you guys, and I had to, like, cover my eyes a little bit because I couldn't watch his face while he omed. So that was, like, a little funny for me. But I mean, that scene where he hugged that guy, I just like, there it is. Like, there's some kind of breakthrough potentially happening there.
For me, I thought I loved I was thankful, for one, that Don didn't end up tumbling out of the window of the McCann building.
That would have been too obvious.
Like the opening of the show. I was so glad. So anything outside of that, I would have been happy with. I appreciated that guy, and I think I told you, Alaia, for me, Leonard talking about himself being an item in the fridge that they just open up and look at and smile and wave at and close the door. I felt like, for me, that was the writers giving that character, Leonard, a voice for Don.
Oh, totally.
And to me, it's like Don is this great shiny thing that everyone loves, everyone wants to be around, everyone wants to have in their lives, but no one wants to really see.
Yep.
And he's just this prop here. And that's what McCann wanted. I feel like McCann bought Sterling Cooper for Don. You know, and basically he kind of said that in a way.
Yeah.
Like, we wanted Don, and I get what I want. And then Don left because he realized in that meeting, I'm just a prop here.
Like when he
I'm
he
taking
said,
my box
I'm
lunch
Don Draper from McCann Erickson.
Yeah.
My heart broke inside.
Yeah. Like, what? And I think he needed to go and say, hey, I'm more than this. I need to go where I can see me and people see me, and they don't see me as this advertising guy to be used, but as a human. And that's what he did out on the road.
Like, you bring in this guy shows up and is like, we're going to have you be the voice of Don for one episode. He needs you to be great. And that dude totally delivered. I have no idea who he is.
Nope.
I call him Mr. Magoo.
I need to see him in more things now just because of that delivery. Incredible.
Well, Don. I spent the last 3 episodes waiting for Don to, like, get hit by a bus or something.
Oh, I know, right?
See, we're all evil people.
This character, I'm so conflicted about Don because he's a cheater, he's a horrible husband, horrible father, but he is a good ad man. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's sort of like, I think that's the point, but I didn't want Don to die because I hate Don, but I don't necessarily like Don. I think Don represents a lot of people who think that their lives are horrible, and then when you put it in perspective, it's just kind of like, grow up and get over it. You know what I mean?
And I think, especially given the time that Don was in, not that he was progressive, but he wasn't necessarily a bad guy. Like, it wasn't a big deal to him that Sal was gay until it affected the business.
Right.
And then he was like, you should have given him what he wanted.
Yeah.
He didn't really have a problem with black people as much as any white person in his position would. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like, it wasn't a big deal to him to have a black secretary or to hire someone. He was pissed when Betty fired Carla. Everybody was pissed when Betty fired Carla. He helped people out. He wasn't necessarily, like, he had bad qualities for sure. And like I said, I'm not one of those people who's just, like, blinded by his attractiveness. He was bad in relationships. He was not a good parent. But overall, I wouldn't call him, like, a horrible guy. Like, there seemed to be a quality in him where he wanted to be helpful, like he helped that crack whore ex-girlfriend. Like, he tried to help people in the ways that he knew how. Right. He took, even Megan, like, he took care of people. He wanted to take care of Stephanie, like, and maybe for him, because he had the money, his way of showing it is with money.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah. He's a total gift giver.
Yeah. But like Betty, he did the best he could with what he had.
Yes.
I mean, think of how screwed up he was. His mother died at birth.
Father
hated him. Raised in a whorehouse. Mean stepmother. The only guy he kind of liked was his Uncle Mac. And I don't think he ever really knew how to cope. And again, I think at a certain point in all of our lives, and I love, again, how we talk, I think, Dee, you're the one who said it, we talk about them like they're real people. But like any of us, there comes a certain point where you have to take responsibility of yourself and not blame, other people. But I think in those ways, like, he sucked in relationships, and his best relationships were with the women he didn't sleep with. But, I mean, in some ways, like, you could see him trying to be a helpful person.
Just decent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that I'm reading Richard Pryor's autobiography right now, and I think it does something to your ability to trust people growing up in a whorehouse, because you see people at a time where they're doing something so secretive and personal and immoral, not to judge, because I'm definitely not judging, but just for a lack of a better term to use it. And it's so against what people present to the world. And I think for Don, it was, you can't really trust women. You can't trust men, because, you know, they all have this secret life, and you see that secret life played out in the room next door when you're 5 and you're just trying to, you know, get a candy bar. You know what I'm saying? And so I understood why he was basically a whore.
Yeah, he was.
He was a whore. I just felt like I didn't have closure on that end as far as his whorish ways. That, not saying it, I had to get closure, but it's just like, okay, so you went back to McCann and you made the Coke ad, but are you still sleeping with every brunette that comes across your path?
Yes, he is.
Of all things, I think that would not change.
What's going on?
I think that would not change, but at least at this point, he's not married, so there's no one he's cheating on. But even that woman in Utah, where she's like, so you've never paid for it, huh? And he's like, I can and I will. I just want it to be voluntary. You don't have to steal from me. Like, I don't see him being an attractive dude and all of that. Women, he wouldn't have to do anything, and women would throw themselves at him. I don't see that changing. My wish in that regard is that at the very least, just, like, don't get married again. You know, like, don't cheat on someone. But if you're going to be single and do what you want to do it. But I definitely don't see that aspect of Don changing.
Don's the type to get married after he gets diagnosed with a deadly disease, and he'll marry someone young and hope that person will nurse him through the rest of his life.
And I want to ask you guys, because it took me until I watched it again last night to think about it. But when Peggy asked, like, what did you ever do that was so wrong? And he said he scandalized his child. Is he referencing when Sally walked in on him?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Just checking.
I
was like, you scandalized your child. What did you do?
Right, because, again, he realized nobody cared that he was Dick Whitman or whatever, you know.
When they found out, nobody cared.
Nobody really cared because, I mean, you're an advertisement. Your whole being is about telling people to do something they might not necessarily want to do.
The only person who cared was Betty, and I see it because it's like,
of course,
you find a marriage like a divorce certificate. It's not really his name. Like, who are you actually married to? Yeah. And that takes it back to Bert, who mentioned at one point when they made Dine sign the contract, he's like, who's signing the contract anyway? It's like, it's not really your real name when it comes down to it. But yeah, most people just didn't care. You know, they knew who he was now, and whatever he's called didn't really make a difference.
True. Did anyone notice that Roy from The Office was one of the dudes?
Yes, I did.
That is one of my girlfriend hates that, because every time I'm watching something, I'm like, oh, that's like the kid. Gene was played by the son Abel from Sons of Anarchy.
Oh.
I haven't seen Sons of Anarchy yet.
The bearded guy in the counseling session, he was on a short-lived Matthew Perry sitcom on NBC.
I've seen him around. I'm like, hey, there's that funny guy.
Yeah, so like I do that all, and she absolutely hates it because she never watches any of the shows I'm referencing. So
I do it too, but like last week's episode had me so concerned for the finale because it wasn't my favorite episode, and I read all the analysis and people talking about how it threw back to the hobo code and all that, and I'm like, I get it. Yeah. But for the penultimate episode, this is not where I want to be. Like, what's going on with everybody else? Because we just had like Don and Pete, and part of me was like, here we go again, when they came in the room and like smacked them around with the phone book, and I'm like, how many times is this guy going to get mugged, beat up? It was just interesting, and I was not happy with that episode.
I have a question about that episode. I thought since he gave the kid his car with the pink slip, that now he was telling that kid to go be Don Draper.
No, he was basically saying, like, go live your life, get out of this town.
Like I reached this fork in the road in my life early on, and I wish somebody would have gave me another chance to do the right thing. And that's why, I mean, I didn't hate the episode in that sense, because I do feel like it was something to seeing Don, like, okay, he learned from his mistakes. He's trying to help this kid avoid the path that he did. And then I also think it was very therapeutic for him to finally admit what he did in Korea and kind of be absolved of that from his contemporaries, because, like, you know, civilians, I guess they hear it and they understand what happens in war and stuff. But like, these are people that fought in wars that are kind of his equals in that sense. And they kind of absolved him. Like, look, everybody did what they had to do to come home.
I will say they still don't know he took someone's name, but they know about the CO.
Right.
But, you know, again, it was not a bad episode. I just felt like when I watched it, I immediately went to Twitter. I said, I hope the finale is not an hour long. Like, there was still so much more that I wanted. I didn't want this to be the episode before the end. And then when someone was like 75 minutes, that's when I was like, that's just an hour with no commercials.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Wow. So we've worked through a lot, and I would love to just go through and get your final thoughts on Mad Men, the series, and where we are and what you think. And we'll start with Miss CG and who had her laundry list. Where are you now that we're at the end of Mad Men?
I enjoyed watching the show, but I feel like all season I was kind of waiting for Wiener to sort of step up on the diversity thing, and it never happened. I don't know why I expected it, but I did. But I enjoyed watching these characters develop, grow, change. Some die, some disappear. I miss Sal. I want to know where he is.
Yeah.
But it was an enjoyable ride. It worries me because I don't want to see a trend in television of this nostalgia for the good old days. But I certainly hope my takeaway is that those days weren't as great as you thought they were.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important lesson. But it was a really well put together show. And I do agree John Hamm definitely deserves an Emmy.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I also think that Freddie Rumsen disappeared. Like, he helped Dawn, and then he was, like, magically gone again.
Totally.
And speaking of disappearing, what happened to Dawn?
Like, Dawn disappeared. Dawn did not get a goodbye.
Right. Like, last we saw, I think Shirley got a goodbye.
She did get a goodbye.
But I just kind of felt like Dawn should have got...
Do you think most of the audience watching the show knew the difference between Dawn and Shirley?
They probably did.
No.
They probably did.
They probably saw Dawn.
I think some hardcore fans might.
Yeah.
Might.
Just because we've had Sola on the show, and I follow both her and Tiana Paris, and I've seen a lot of people that were like, I would watch the Dawn and Shirley show, like a lot of, and white people too, white and black people, because they had good scenes when they were together very rarely, but people were like, I would love to watch the Dawn and Shirley show, like that should be the spinoff. So I think
be like Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah. So I think some people kind of got that.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So CG, you are CG the Geek on Twitter.
Yes.
CIJI the Geek on Twitter.
The Geek on Twitter. Yep.
Awesome. Stephanie, your thoughts?
Yes. I came into Mad Men late. I was a Netflix binge watcher.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love a good drama. Yeah. I love a good story. And for me, that's what it was. It was a slow burn. I don't think I could go back and binge watch the whole thing again. But I'm definitely glad for the experience of it. I loved it, actually. I really enjoyed that show. It's one of my top favorite shows. And I love seeing the characters and remembering where they started from and how they transformed into who they are and just grew as people. And I love a story in that way. I could watch them go on and just create more ads, and I would be perfectly happy, but I know that's never going to happen, so I'm going to play that show out in my mind.
What did you say to me on message? Something about cereal or something?
Yeah, like when a show ends, I'm like, man, I wonder what they're doing. I could watch them just literally like eating cereal in the morning and going to work and saying hi to the bus driver, and that's their life and that's the show. Just because I don't want to say goodbye to the characters, so I'll play them on in my mind. And I'm glad it was good. It was a good experience, and it was a good finale.
It was. I probably will need a break, but I would love to, now that it's complete, watch it through again and pay attention to all the arcs all the way through, and then take a huge break from it again, because it is a lot, and it is a lot of, like, sadness, broken relationships. But yeah, it's a fantastic series. Dee, what about you?
I have it ranked number 2 on my all-time list.
What's your number 1?
Yeah.
The Wire, of course.
Oh,
wow.
The Wire is
have that show discussion. I'm sorry.
Wire is the greatest show ever created. And you talk about nuance and breaking down a city on every single part. Okay, that's a whole different podcast.
That is.
I want to be a part of that podcast. Just put it out there. Sure.
Yes, we can do that, because I feel like I've been having to defend The Wire a lot more than normal, and I don't know if I like it, but but Mad Men is number 2. To echo what everybody else said, these are just great characters.
They are.
Yeah.
It's great characters and it's great writing, and I will watch that anyway. Like, I put up with so much trash on TV. Partly my fault, because I am a sitcom junkie. But like, I put up with so much other stuff. So, like, to see a show that takes the time and effort to develop his characters and to make quality scripts and to have quality actors. It's really a joy to watch, and it's the staple when I compare it, because I get into a lot of discussions, being a TV podcast guy, getting a lot of discussions about like Empire and Scandal and why I'm not like fully on board with those shows. And it's all to me like the writing and execution and the tone of the shows. And I just think that this is one of the shows that just kind of figured it out and mastered in a way that was so artful and so like the attention to detail that
Very
they put.
Thought out.
I don't know. It's just awesome. It's number 2 on my list because nothing will ever beat The Wire. The Wire is just MJ sitting on the throne up there. I won't care.
Wow. So tell everyone, as you said, you're a podcaster. Tell everyone where they can find you online and find your show.
Well, this is your first time hearing my voice. I am at D1H on Twitter. The show's Twitter is Mac and D Talk TV. You can find all of our older all of our older episodes at the website, macandDtalkTV.com. We're on Stitcher. We're on iTunes. So rate, review, and subscribe.
Yep. And it's MAK, right? Mac
M-A-K,
and D.
yeah.
All right. macandDtalkTV.com. Yeah, to echo all of your thoughts, I mean, great show. I don't know if it's my number 2. It might be. We had an episode last week where I revealed to my co-host, Brandy, that I am a huge X-Files fan. I mean, she knew, but she really found out, like, how big of an X-Files fan I am. So Mad Men is undoubtedly in my top 5, most likely in my top 3. I don't know where it sits in there, but it is definitely one of my favorites. And at this point, I probably watched it through several times because, like, before season 5 started, I watched it all. And then, like, before each season, I've, like, worked my way through as much of the previous seasons as possible. But I love these characters. I think it, as Dee said, very well thought out. I was satisfied with the ending. I was content. Like I said, after last week, I was worried. But it gave me what I needed. It was not perfect. But I can live with this ending. And I will forever wonder what happened to everyone. So yeah, I love Mad Men, and thank you all for indulging me. It was great to chat with other fans about it.
Hey.
And not drive Brandy crazy.
You don't understand the struggle of just having a quality conversation about a show you love.
Indeed.
They don't.
They
really
do
don't.
not get it. So I appreciate all of you for being here and taking the time. And for all of you listening, as usual, my spiel, you can find us online, 18to49podcast.com. We're on Twitter at 18to49podcast. We're on Facebook, 18to49. And you can email us if you love, hate Mad Men, want to share your final thoughts, connect with any of our guests, 18to49podcast@gmail.com. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thanks.